Greetings, friends. Nice to see you. Nice to see old friends, see new friends. So let's just take a few moments while folks arrive. Maybe just taking the opportunity to find your body, feel the ground that you're sitting on. Okay, so before we start, let's just take a few, maybe 3 slower, deeper breaths. And as you breathe, just taking the breath down through the body, touching earth that we're sitting on, either through sitting on a chair or on the floor, wherever our body is touching the ground. Just taking a slower, deeper, more deliberate inhalation. And then on an exhalation, just all that we're holding in the jaw and the shoulders, softening the belly. So we start to feel the earth, the ground beneath us, holding, supporting. And just a few breaths like this as we gather together for our session today. So for those that haven't got access to the chanting booklet handy, I'm just putting in the chat here, and you can open that up and we'll do a few chants from there to start our session. And begin with the honoring of the Buddha. So the top of page 3, the Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. And then we'll go to the first mantra. Actually, no, we'll go to the third mantra, the refuge mantra. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang one day. And then to the Heart Sutra, which is on page 11. And the Great Compassion Mantra on page 12. And the Gate Mantra at the end of that, which is back to page 3. I'm just putting that in here in the chat. So you have that. Okay, so welcome to everyone. So glad you could be with us. So let's begin by honoring the Triple Jewel and doing these chants as we arrive and ground into this session. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. And in the third mantra, Buddha, 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 one day, Dharma, 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 one day, Sangha, 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 one day, Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, one day, Buddha, 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 one day, Dhamma, 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 one day, Sangha, 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 one day, Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, one day. And on page 11, the Heart Sutra, there's one translation of it, and many, many different translations and ways of chanting this sutra. This is from the City of 10,000 Buddhas, the community seeded by Master Xunhua, this particular translation. When Avalokiteshvara was practicing the profound prajna paramita, she illuminated the 5 skandhas and saw that they are all empty, and she crossed beyond all suffering and difficulty. Shariputra, form does not differ from emptiness. Emptiness does not differ from form. Form itself is emptiness. Emptiness itself is form. So too are feeling, cognition, formation, and consciousness. Shariputra, all dhammas are empty of characteristics. They are not produced, not destroyed, not defiled, not pure, and they neither increase nor diminish. Therefore, in emptiness there is no form, feeling, cognition, formation, or consciousness, no eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, or mind, no sight, sound, smells, taste, objects of touch, or dharmas, no field of the eyes up to and including no field of mind consciousness, and no ignorance or ending of ignorance, up to and including no old age and death or ending of old age and death. There is no suffering, no accumulating, no extinction, and no way, and no understanding and no attaining. Because nothing is attained, the Bodhisattva, through reliance on prajna paramita, is unimpeded in her mind. Because there is no impediment, she is not afraid, and she leaves distorted dream thinking far behind. Ultimately, nirvana. All Buddhas of the 3 periods of time attain Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi through reliance on prajna paramita. Therefore know that prajna paramita is a great spiritual mantra, a great bright mantra, a supreme mantra, an unequaled mantra. It can remove all suffering. It is genuine and not false. That is why the mantra prajna paramita was spoken, recited like this. Gate, gate, paragate, parasangate, bodhisvaha. So from this Dharma door, depth Dharma, opened by Avalokiteshvara, Guanyin Bodhisattva, to the great compassion mantra, the heart mantra of Guanyin. It's on page 12 of the Chanting book. And this great mantra embodies the energy body of Guanyin, activating the hands and eyes, merciful response to suffering in this world. Just put the chanting booklet again in the chat for those that are just arriving. You can open the link there and go to page 12. So you can both join in this mantra or just listen to it. The sound, like running water, is analogous to the waters of compassion, just running and opening into the world and touching all form, alleviating suffering and releasing all beings from pain. So, Namo Quan Shin Pusa, and the great compassion mantra. Fashayere moha fashayere dola dola di di ni shavola ye jela jela mama va mola mud yesi yesi jana jana ola jen vola jeli va java jen vola hulu hulu mola hulu hulu zili sola sola zili zili sulu sulu Puttiye, puttiye, putwaye, putway, miririye, nola gingerire, shine, nobaye, mono, swapahasi, ye swapaha, mohasi, dwaye, swap. swapaha ye swapaha si tvoye ye shiravan la ye swapaha no la jinje swapaha mola no la Sila Sangha Matraya Swapaha Swapamoha Sidvaya Swapaha Jajilaya Sidvaya Swapaha Paramaja Ye Swapaha Nola Jinja Banjalaya Swapaha Mabali Shanjalaya Swapaha Namaha Radana Radaya Aliye Balajiri Jambalaya Swapaha Nansi Dyanduman Patwaya Swampaha Gate Gate Paragate Parasangate Bodhisva Gate Gate Paragate Parasangate Bodhisvara Gate Gate Paragate Parasangate Bodhisvara. I encourage you to just be very spacious and gentle as you turn your attention more inwardly, like a flighty bird landing, the attention that is often pulled by wherever our thought forms and interest is going. In this practice, we allow that bird to land here in our embodied presence. And not doing that through trying to force and push and direct with will, although there is a place for that, for sure, but more receptively with the question, what's present for you now? How is it now? Whatever is here now for you is within the field of our loving awareness. There's nothing wrong. There may be disturbance or difficulty, and that's all part of our field of practice. So kindly, spaciously, gently, allowing, if it's supportive, the breath to guide your attention, or sensation in the body, or sound to guide attention more inward. And again, if it's helpful, taking a few slower, deeper breaths so you feel the whole body On an inhalation, with your awareness, with the subtle breath energy, the nourishment of that, through all the energy pathways, through all the internal parts of the body, the brain, and down through the torso, arms, legs, hands, soles of the feet. And on an exhalation, just softening, releasing, grounding, slowing down. So if you like, we can take together 5 breaths like this, to slow down, to steady, to arrive. And count them on your fingers. If you get lost, just keep going, find a finger and keep going. And just keeping it really simple. Simple but deepening. Just tracking the pathway of the breath, or the sensation of the breath. Still part of the air elements, or breath sensation is part of the breath element. So you might just have the attention rest on a sensation that you're drawn to within the sphere of the body, maybe on the upper lip, under the nostrils. If you find entering the body more complex for you right now, you can track the whole pathway of the breath, or just settling in an area of the body. Be pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral sensation. And just kindly, gently, patiently resting attention there. And where attention rests, awareness starts to strengthen, accumulate, gather. And the nature of awareness is to bring things into balance, to heal, to recalibrate, to illuminate. Our task is just the simple activity of guiding attention to embodied presence and resting there, breath by breath, moment by moment. a sense of allowing spacious kindness with whatever is present for us. Extending metta, this deep practice of the core of the word means to soften the heart, means friendly, means non-judgmental, allowing, doesn't mean non-discerning, but just this deep allowing for what is. Doesn't mean we don't respond skillfully to what is with compassion, but to know what is first through this metta, this deep, spacious acceptance. How the body, feeling tones, this space, this moment, the structures of the self, how they're patterned, how they move, and all of this illuminated by conscious awareness of the citta, of the heart, heart-mind. Extending this metta not only inwardly, internally, but to each other, sharing this space together of Dharma, and to the world, to all beings resident in this one awareness, suffusing the world above, below, and all around with non-aversion, non-hatred, loving kindness. May all be protected. May all receive support in these times of great crisis. May all be healed by the merciful nectar of the Dharma protectors, the subtle ones that guard this realm with compassion. So, so we'd like to reflect on the Dharma. The theme of this session is being Dharma, which is a term that Ajahn Chah used a lot. And riffing on that, engaging a quantum shift of consciousness to meet our climate crisis, informed by the teachings of the Heart Sutra, which again could be a year's contemplation. We have a short time to try and touch on a few main points. But before going there, I just really like to pause and just bring to our hearts and our remembrance. There's just so many at the moment around the world being impacted by these sudden, devastating climate shifts and fast breakdown of the ecosphere and the support systems that many beings, not just the human realm, but so many beings that have taken for granted and been used to the rapidity of the shifts. These devastating infernos, they're not really fires even, just sweeping through landscapes, pristine forests, cities, homes, and flooding, washing away, devastating, destroying. we're entering now our planetary emergency in a way that can't really be ignored, although breaking the spell of what keeps us being able to really, really consciously engage and accept this moment is what we're really focusing on. So may we dedicate this focus, this Dharma, this practice to all impacted at this time, which is actually, those impacted are really just in front of what's in store for many places around the world. So it's a very, very sobering moment. And it reminds me of the moment that the Buddha left the palace and was made aware of impermanence, aging, and death. And this, in the Buddhist understanding, is called the meeting of the Devadutta. Devadutta is translated as a heavenly messenger. It's not the kind of heavenly message that we want, but it's the message that precedes the moment of awakening. And, it's not just seeing impermanence, seeing death, but it's really going very deep into our core and understanding what we're involved with in this world, what is actually the premise of everything, this great movement of change. Nothing is stable. Nothing actually ultimately has substantiality. And in the same way, this Devadutta is the body of the earth. This is a moment when the body of earth, this Devadutta, is arriving. And so we have this great awakening moment, and it's awakening from a dream into actually what is a nightmare. Last night I had a nightmare. I was running, just trying to run, and it felt like a very primal place in my being that's activated by what's going on. And there is this feeling of running. Where can we run to? We have to turn back and turn back and meet the moment. So this is where the Dharma arises to support us, to come back to earth. There's so much that can be oriented, the way we can orientate in our individual practice, which is around transcending this material plane, because it's hard to be here. And we see that metaphor playing out in those, for example, that have the resources, those that are becoming the ruling class of the planet, trying to leave the earth through spaceships and so on, and go to Mars. Let's go to Mars, why don't we? It's the same feeling of like we can somehow get out of this. But this is a very humbling moment for us in the human realm to understand that actually there is no getting out of this. This is the moment of dukkha, that the most profound teaching really in a way of the Buddha is to actually face the experience of, at its most coarser level, of deep suffering that we can't really escape until we understand the path. And at its most subtle level, this separative consciousness that is actually at the core of us seeing everything outside of ourselves, and therefore feeling this great lack of belonging and connection that leads to this drivenness for being satiated in some way, that we can never be satiated until we understand this core message and turn back to the source, turn back to the heart, turn back and return to earth, return to these bodies, return to the place where we feel most challenged by. I know that Captain Kirk or Shatner, William Shatner, when he was taken up by Jeff Bezos in the spaceship, talked about how he was expecting it to be the most extraordinary, beautiful experience of his life. And he was really excited about it. But what he actually found was the strongest feeling of grief as he looked back at the planet And to quote him, the contrast between the vicious coldness of space and the warm nurturing of earth below filled me with an overwhelming sadness. It filled me with dread. My trip to space was supposed to be a celebration. Instead, it felt like a funeral. So this is what we practice for, actually. Ajahn Chah said, practice is preparation for the moment when we really need to meet what is hard to meet. And this is a very hard to meet moment. It's a moment also that has an invitation within it. As the Dharma has, it has a very profound invitation. And the invitation that I put out into the newsletter, and to requote that, is to shift from a system that's created this result. And it's been a result rooted in millennia, a millennia of a divorce through religious metaphor of transcendence, and through a colonial project of that's been going on for millennia, but particularly the Eurocentric colonial project of domination and extraction, and the myth of endless growth. So a system that ultimately rewards what has to happen internally to enact that at the scale that we've enacted it, a great divorce inside, a great split in our being, which generates a sort of sociopathy, a lack of empathy, a lack of connection. And that's replaced by the creed of extraction that's driven by power, yes, power of ego, domination, and desecration ultimately of the sacred. So that is in a way what we're seeing, what we're immersed in. We're seeing it without any veils anymore. And to replace that by a more collaborative, Gaian informed cosmology of interbeing, to quote Thich Nhat Hanh, that practices a reclamation of this sacredness on all levels and in all spheres, by coming back to earth and by entering the deeper dimensions of the practice. And, for this, we can draw a little on the Heart Sutra. It's a very profound text. It doesn't really have much meaning if we're looking at it through the cognitive mind. And if we're looking at it, trying to understand, what does this mean? There is no eyes, ears, nose, tongue, taste. There is no, in a way, it kind of deconstructs the very foundations of the path, even. No suffering, no ending of suffering. It's a real sort of challenge for us. It's a text, a pithy text, that if we're trying to understand it through the cognitive frame, through our linear thinking, we won't really get the message, because it's not about a cognitive transmission. It's a transmission that is designed to take us beneath or beyond the way that we have viewed, and the lenses that we look through, and the way that we've been shaped and internalized a worldview dependent a lot on the cognitive and particularly rational brain that is rooted in this separative consciousness, the mano vijnana, the sense of subject object, which is at the core of what the Buddha collapsed on the night of his awakening. Nama-rupa and the dependent origination. It's a whole other portal which we haven't got time to go into, but it's completely deeply related to the Heart Sutra. So the Heart Sutra is an invitation to go into the, where is it an invitation to? An invitation beyond. In the text of the Heart Sutra, it actually, in some translations, it starts with the word Iha Sariputra. Iha Sariputra. Iha is a word that means here. So the essential message is be here. Be here. So return here. And then it talks about this, through this deconstruction, it talks about a leap, a leap beyond the walls of the mind, a leap beyond, leaving dream thinking far behind. So there is another dimension of being, and this is what Ajahn Chah called the being Dharma. He said, first one learns about the Dharma, but doesn't quite understand it. So you practice, but you haven't really seen the truth of it. You see the Dharma, but you have not yet become Dharma. So you may study, understand, practice, and see Dharma, and to quote Ajahn Chah, but to actually be Dharma is something quite difficult. It is a place for each individual to reach a point where there is no falsehood. So this being Dharma is really, in the Theravada understanding, is like entering the stream of the Dharma. It's to enter to return to the natural state of the citta, the undivided heart, the pure essence of consciousness, if you like, the undivided awareness. It's to actually the what is before we move into being shaped by the constructs of self. What it precedes that, and to realize the deathless heart, the timeless heart, is to taste this peace of the ever-abiding nibbana, or ever-abiding peace, not going anywhere. That's why it's iha, come back, not going, never been anywhere. In some level, nothing ever happened. It's a rather complex dream and story that we're in. And yet that's not to say that, to dismiss that there is a lot happening that we need to attend to. This is a message to the Bodhisattva, from the Bodhisattva. It doesn't mean an abdication of response or responsibility, even if we weren't causing what, we're all actually deeply embedded in the causes of what's created this moment. But, we're not caused it all. But the point is, we have to, at this moment, is a moment to responsibility and ability to respond from a different place that we've responded from. That's the point. And this in the Dharma is called entering the stream. One that's entered the stream has gone beyond the view of self, shaped by the 5 khandhas that's named in the Heart Sutra, form, feeling, perception, so on and so on. These 5 khandhas that constitute the shapes of self, but when they're picked up, as the Buddha says, it's like a river flowing. It has this appearance of a solid thing, and you go to the river and you pick it up and it just runs through your fingers. It's just bubbles. It's like the sense of self. He made the analogy, you go, there's this really important kind of story that we're in, this drama, and you go, where is the substantiality? And the same way, it's like bubbles. So seeing that, so it's a shift of view. It's an ontological shift. It means that there's a radically different lens that we're looking through. A shift of view of self, that's not our main orientation point. We've gone beyond doubt, which is another way of saying, it's not to say we don't doubt or inquire, but it's the kind of doubt that relies on thought to figure it out, to describe reality. So we've gone the shift into intuitive knowing. This is the nature of the actual unshaped citta. It has a quality, and this quality is Buddhic, Buddha, which means knowing. It means to know, knowing that it has within it an unknowing. It's not knowing in a separative consciousness, but it's knowing the intimacy, if you like. As Dogen said, the intimacy of everything is intimate within this knowing to us. And it is going beyond the third thing that is seen through as into stream entry, is going beyond rites and rituals in and of themselves as a means to, we're going to get there if we do this and do this. And yes, we will. This builds and supports the path. That doesn't mean to say we don't do path activity, but this realization of the beyond is immediate, because it never was something we could acquire or gain. It's not an acquisition. It's a realization of our true nature. So that is then understood. So one that enters the stream, a sotapanna is called, moves beyond. It doesn't mean to say that it's not the end of the story. Often people have this experience and they think, oh, that's it, put my flag up and announce enlightenment. But that's just the first stage of the path awakening. But they're still being subjected to greed, hatred, and delusion. Subtly, you're not completely thrown off the path. You can lose your way, but you know how to get back. But it does start to diminish and undermine envy. This is from the suttas: envy, hypocrisy, denigration, jealousy, fraud, domineering. There's a way that you can't stick it to people in the way that you can if you're in the self mode and really committed to that. It's a complete reorientation of understanding. It's a movement beyond your identity, as of all of it. It's not to say identity isn't important and then certain identities need to be really reclaimed in major ways. It's not saying that, but there's not a complete allegiance only to my particular gender, nation, state, tribal identity, so on and so on. So it's a radical orientation. So what I want to touch into in the very short time is that this realization through the Heart Sutra, through this teaching, this leap beyond, it can be applied systemically, and just where we need to, as I was saying last week, it's not just about the personal path. If we really are serious about meeting this moment, it's about really us looking at the systems that are producing the effect and how can we apply the Dharma and our right action, right speech, action, and so on in the path of the Dharma and the Eightfold Path. There is action that needs to be taken. This is part of the Dharma, not just witnessing to, it's actually engaging. So, so to actually see the shapes, how we're shaped by the system, and to quote Alnor Ladar, who's one of the systems thinkers that I'm in a training with at the moment through Brave Earth. It's a center down in Costa Rica. And Alnor's from the Sufi lineage and writes at the crossroads of politics, spirituality, activism. He says we cannot abdicate responsibility for what we believe to be true to philosopher, economists, political leaders, and I put in brackets, not his quote, eccentric, sociopathic billionaires. We need to question this orthodoxy of power. That's actually that this orthodoxy of power that we accept and we pay allegiance to, even grudgingly, will figure out the solutions that we need, because where they're coming from is part of a system that is not able to really shift in the way that needs to shift, at the speed that needs to shift, in the radical way that needs to shift at this moment to address the devastation that we're now in. Because there's a great allegiance, particularly by the 1% who are trying to run the planet for their own ends, really, which requires, as we're seeing, like in my home country of Britain, a dismantlement of human workers and environmental rights and protections. That particular engine that's running the system is narcissistically driven. And so we see that in full glare in the political realm. And it's very ugly, it's very cruel, it's very painful. And so it's not where we want, not what we had. So the implication of this is the reclamation. It's a reclamation that we all need to undertake, a reclamation of this original heart, a reclamation of our own empowered agency. And we need also really, or let's put it like this, it's hard to do this alone. And so the heightened sense of our individuation and the way that the politics have placed the onus on the person, if you recycle, if you get an EV car, it really is an avoidance and deflection of the need for us to actually tackle the whole system that's actually burning up the planet, that we are driven into by less and less choices that we can make, this sort of machinery of based on the myth of endless growth for the power of profit. So all of that has to be dismantled by us making a shift. And my premise, really, informed by my limited, my premise is starting from. It's not to admit to enormous amounts of ignorance and places that I don't understand, but my sense, just put it like that. It's not a creed or a view. It's just a sense and an understanding that for that shift, we need to internally really, in our meditation and meditative practice, start to make real this intuitive guidance of the heart, because it's from there that we're here and feel a different path, a different way. Not just the loops of the mind caught in fear and overwhelm and trying to think our way out of it. It's just like breaking that set, breaking that spell, that will bring, it will bring something. It's not to deny the power of logic, rational logic, but intuitive logic. And if to be able to do this in collaborative counsel, to quote Al Noor again, if we spent a third of the time in this way, in collaborative counsel with a set of inquiry focuses that helps us shift our worldview, shift out of the machinery that we're cogs within. If we spent, that was not my quote, that was me just riffing, but to quote, go back to the quote, sorry, my mind tends to move here, there, and everywhere. If we spend a third of the time in this way, in collaborative counsel, inquiring together, as we do in self-help workshops and so on in our enlightenment endeavors, our individual enlightenment endeavors, we would already have a revolution on our hands. We would have a positive revolution, a revolution of love, a complete state shift. So rather than, condemning the planet to a state shift of destruction, there's a moment when we're, rather than devolving back, because there's this push, this fascistic push to devolve us back into some kind of, it's not even the 1950s, it's like the 1800s, like some devolution of into some kind of theocratic Gilead, handmaidens Gilead. I don't know if you read that book, but anyway, because the system, what's driven the system, those that have benefited, is the system itself has become a sort of a momentum unto itself, like a great beast roving, consuming. It's threatened by this evolutionary dynamic that is actually trying to emerge, that's actually awakening us to our true nature as interbeing within this web of life, and feeling as Ajahn Chah, the being Dharma. To be Dharma is to be a conduit for the deep intelligence of the Dharma, the deep intelligence of nature, if you like. Nature is one original translation of Dhamma. And in that belonging, not only as a collective, but in the belonging to all of it, a cosmology of belonging, we will hear solutions and ways to move from a very different place for each of us individually and collectively. So that's somehow very threatening to the system. So it is a battle of sorts, really. So to be willing, the Buddha entered a battle. And he continued that even after his awakening. He was a warrior. So this is within the Dharma. It's, and there is this sort of sense of, no, where's my peaceful space? That's a luxury, and that's important. So this systemic, as much as we shift in the stream entry to a different orientation, to the knowing present Buddhic heart of awareness, we shift systemically to a trans-rational logic, if you like. This is in a way, drawing again from Al Noor and his associates' work, this ontological shift of lens, a radical shift of vision, to move from a historical amnesia, looping through ancestral trauma, to a remembrance and repair, from the valuing and heightening of individualistic separation, materialism, and the soullessness that comes with that, to a non-dual, animistic. So I'm a little bit, tiny bit, what's the word? Anyway, that's the best I can do with that pronunciation. Queering is like moving out of the patriarchal designation of what it means to be gendered in certain ways or certain roles, and certain, it's just a liberation around all of that, from the unquestioning orthodoxy of power to self-empowerment, self-engaged and collective engaged responsibility, we devolve the power structure and reclaim the power within a collective. From competition and hoarding wealth to service, solidarity, equitable sharing, and the accumulation of capital to the liberation capital. So we're not just got a few people sitting at the top of the pile while the rest are being restructured into some neo-feudalistic survival mode, trying to scrape by. From trauma to patterns of trauma, to conscious working through that, healing, to a recultivation, not, I like one of the terms Al Noor uses of what takes up real estate in our energy body. You know, to replace that with a recultivation of our life force, our spirit, connected within the cosmology of a web of life. It's so ecstatic. It's so joyful. Even in the midst of calamity, we don't have to sacrifice that life force, that joy, that heart. In fact, it sharpens that more. From entitlements historically given through, often through ways of violence towards some peoples or systems or nature itself, or desecration, lack of oppressions, lack of honoring, to heal, to entrust, to collaborate. From the mind-numbing ways that the system works, where we're on a treadmill, to reclaiming beauty and joy and poetry and arts and music. Happiness. So how we do this is we're at the edge of our map. You know, this is new to be mapped territory. It's not, I mean, the Buddha's path, he taught a path that is very challenging, but it's doable. And you could look at that and say, we can't do that, but we can do it. We just take the steps. And at the heart of this, mind is the forerunner of all things, right? So mind, it's kind of, there's a certain way that, you know, it's all mind, if you like. This mind, to quote Max Planck, the father of quantum theory, this mind is the matrix of all matter. Mind, this jitta, this pure heart, is informed by intention. So intention, the Buddhist practice of aligning and grounding intentionality. What is our intention? To intend, not just, yes, it starts here with our self-improvement. There's actually nothing wrong with that. That's good. It just doesn't end there. It has to mature. The intention, as the Buddha, when after his enlightenment, he sat under the Bodhi tree and was in bliss. And it was like, well, it kind of, you know, I guess I need to serve something, you know, and then realize, and he didn't probably say that, but he said, one who has nothing greater than themselves to serve lives unhappily. So what is this intention? This intention is to serve. We serve the Dharma. We serve nature. We serve each other. We serve the web of life. We serve whatever's in front of us. It's not transactional. Life isn't then a transactional, you know, payoff bank account. It's a relational emergence where we're lifting each other into a different frequency, into a Gaian-informed cosmology of interbeing that practices reclamation of the sacred on all levels and in all spheres. So may it be so. Thank you for staying with me for the very swift tour. In a time where, you know, everything is, let's move to the timeless because time is pressing. Let's just sit for a moment, take a breath. And let's just, you know, land in the strength that we have in our heart, the strength that we have through our ancestral lineage, the strength that we have and creativity and inspiration to make rapid change that we historically have in the human realm. The enormity of allies that we have through all realms that are just waiting for this allegiance, waiting to be recognized, waiting to be met in love. Plants, the trees, the animals, the unseen beings, the creatures of the planet. Even the stars and the planets, we're in a cosmology of interbeing that's so vast. And we are participants that belong within that. And our gift is needed, our healing, our medicine that we bring is needed. So let us hold that in our hearts, with joy, with love, with potential. And just breathe that through your whole body. And let's keep breathing that through our bodies until we really believe it and live it and become it, until we're being that Dharma, being that spirit, being that reality, being nature, and hearing the intelligence of that as a guide. May you transfer all blessings to wherever is needed at this time for the alleviation of suffering, for the protection of all, for the quelling of fires, for the soothing of the floods and the waters, for lifting the frequency of the planet so that we can make the shifts we need to make internally, externally, for the welfare of all. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Thank you so much, everyone. So great to see you. Go well, stay well, and see you again very soon down the road. Much love.